Welcome everyone. This is the City of Greater Geelong's Planning Committee. This is the planning meeting number 220. Council would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung traditional owners of the land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are part of the Greater Geelong community today. This meeting is being broadcast on the internet, and the recording of this meeting will be published on Council's website. Given the COVID-19 circumstances, we can't have all the members of the community in a room with us. So it's terrific that we can still share our meetings via the live stream, but we will have community members on the Zoom at certain parts of this meeting. So I'd like to introduce you to our panel. I have got, in order of preference around my screen, Councillor Anthony Aiken, Councillor Belinda Maloney, Councillor Sarah Mansfield, Councillor Eddie Contell, Councillor Trent Sullivan, Councillor Ron Nelson. If we've got any apologies, I don't think we've got any apologies to note at this point. I'd like to also introduce you to the officers who are going to form part of this meeting. So I've got Tom Hams, who's the Principal Planner of Business Facilitation, John Rush, who's the Coordinator of Statutory Planning, and Joanne Van Slagren, who is the Manager of City Development. The procedure for the hearing tonight will be that the officer will present a brief summary of the written report to the committee. The objectors will then have an opportunity to speak to their objection, and we will ask them to come in one at a time. We ask that objectors speak for no longer than 3 minutes, and at which time a notification alarm will sound. The objectors will be able to see the countdown blue sky timer, it's called, on the corner there, and you'll be able to see how long you've got. The applicant may then speak to the application. We would ask the applicant speak for sort of no longer than 5 to 10 minutes, at which time the alarm will sound as well. At the end of the presentation, the panel will have a further discussion about the application and make a decision. Applicants and objectors should always refer their comments to the panel, and they won't really be speaking to each other because they probably won't be in the room at the same time. The panel hearings are not a question and answer forum, but a chance for the parties to explain their position and views to the panel. The decision of this committee is a final decision of council acting under delegated authority. And if anyone is aggrieved by this decision of the committee, they may appeal to VCAT, the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal in Melbourne, and our staff can assist during office hours. Confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting of 8th of July. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Aiken and Councillor Sullivan, thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest to note? No, okay. So the matter before us is PP 402-2020. It's in relation to 1 Lunan Avenue in Tremcondra. I would like to invite Tom Ham to come through and give his officer report, please, Tom.
Thanks, Councillor Grisbeck. So to begin, my presentation will provide an overview of the subject site and the proposed development, summarise the application process, including discussions with Council's Heritage Advisor, outline the forms of public notice and community consultation undertaken in relation to the proposal, and provide detail on my recommended grounds of refusal to assist in helping councillors understand the reasoning behind why the application as proposed in its current form is not recommended to be supported. Firstly, I'd just like to point out an incorrect figure in my planning report, which stated the setback of the dwelling was 5.5 metres, which is in fact the setback of the original submitted plans. The setback of the dwelling facade on the plans under assessment is 6.1 metres, with a veranda that's set back 5 metres from the street. In terms of compliance with the street setback standard under Res Code, a variation is still required, with the exact figures outlined in the Clause 55 assessment and referenced at page 52 of my planning report. In terms of the subject site, the site's located in Tremcondra, which is an established suburb north of the Geelong CBD. Site's rectangular parcel of land with a frontage Lunan Avenue of approximately 15 metres and a depth of approximately 40 metres. The site's presently developed with a Federation-era single-storey detached dwelling and ancillary outbuildings. The existing dwelling has a 6 metre front setback and presents as an asymmetrical facade with a front porch connecting to a gable end constructed on the western side of the building. The building's clad in weatherboard with a zinc roof material, has a low-scale brick front fence, and some plantings in the frontage of the site. And it's noted the dwelling adjoining to the eastern boundary of the subject site has contributory heritage listing. The application proposes to demolish all existing fabric on the site, including the Federation era dwelling, and construct 2 double-storey dwellings and subdivide the land into tots. The proposed buildings are proposed in a semi-detached form with a party wall. Dwellings proposed with a complicated asymmetrical roof form with projecting dormers. A wraparound veranda is proposed, and the front private open space to each dwelling would be separated by a 1.8 metre dividing picket fence. The materials used will be a combination of weatherboard and brick. As stated earlier, the proposed dwelling will be set back 6.1 metres to the facade of the building, with the proposed veranda encroaching further into this setback to be 5 metres from Lunan Avenue. Narrow side setbacks are proposed on the east and west sides of the site, with part of the eastern boundary wall built on the boundary. A boundary-to-boundary 2-storey garages are proposed on the southern boundary, abutting a rear laneway. The rear yards are to be divided by a 2-metre high brick fence. Each dwelling comprises of 3 and 4 bedrooms, respectively, and details of the floor layouts can be found on page 9 and 10. References TP 4.1, TP 4.2 of the submitted plans. The application plan shall plan of subdivision to subdivide the land into 2 lots. The lots are proposed with a frontage of approximately 7.5 and 8 metres respectively, with a depth of approximately 40 metres, with lot 1 retaining a total land size of around 315 square metres and lot 2 300 square metres. Pages 16 and 17 of the planning report show excerpts of the submitted plans, including the proposed subdivision layout. In terms of processing, the application was referred to Council's Heritage Advisor, Dr. David Rowe, who did not support the proposal as it was considered the design did not adequately address the local heritage controls and policies. His comments stated that although the subject site is situated near the western boundary of the heritage area, it is near the western entry to Lunan Avenue, and this area is largely characterised by detached, single-storey, hipped and gabled Edwardian, Federation and interwar bungalow dwellings. There are attic-like additions to dwellings opposite at 4 and 6 Lunan Avenue, while considerably further east are recessive 2-storey additions or 2-storey rings to infill development. The heritage area remains largely intact for its almost exclusive detached dwellings on original single allotments, with one exception being 20 Lunan Avenue that's been developed with single-storey hipped and gabled dwellings arranged in a tandem form. Given all the above, the proposed dwellings do not respond to the relevant heritage objectives, policies and guidelines. Consequently, there is considered to be an adverse effect on the significance, character and appearance of the heritage area, with the reasons outlined being the large bulk as a consequence of 2 dwellings being proposed by comparison to the immediately neighbouring dwellings, noting the contributory significance of 3 Lunan Avenue adjoining the eastern boundary, the elevated wall heights and eave heights and roof ridge heights by comparison to immediately neighbouring significant dwellings, the forward location of the proposed dwellings, including the veranda, which has the potential to exacerbate the visual prominence of the proposed dwellings. The Heritage Advisor provided further recommendations on how the design could better integrate with the street, which were given to the applicant through further information request. These stated, while it's recognised that a key design outcome has been to ensure a detached outward appearance of these hipped and gabled semi-detached dwellings, it's recommended that the application be reconsidered. Ideally, but informally, the existing dwelling could be retained and extended at the rear, including recessive and subservient 2-storey additions. In any case, a single detached dwelling on the site would best respond to the significance, integrity and relevant heritage policy and guidelines for the heritage area. Any revised proposal should consider a front setback to the front veranda that matches the neighbouring dwelling, a single-storey appearance from Lunan Avenue, including equivalent eave heights and roof ridge heights as outlined and illustrated in the city's Heritage and Design Guidelines 1997, and should include a streetscape elevation drawing, external materials and finishes that accord with the heritage policy and neighbouring significant heritage fabric. The advisor stated if the statutory planning department was to support the proposed semi-detached dwellings that have an outward appearance as a single detached dwelling in two-lot subdivision, confirmation from the applicant should be sought on any fire rating and other measures that may negatively impact this outward appearance, including the need for any party walls elevated above the roof line and separating the two dwellings with a front veranda and a boundary fence in the front setback separating the two properties. In terms of public notice, the application was advertised via letters to adjoining and nearby properties, a sign placed on site and submitted material available on Council's website. In total, there were 51 objections lodged with Council during the notice period, with key matters raised by objectors including developments inconsistent and unsympathetic to existing neighbourhood and streetscape. The applicant has not adequately considered the contributory elements the existing dwelling makes to the area with regard to the heritage controls. The principle of development being construction of two dwellings and two-lot subdivision is out of character. There is a lack of on-street parking in Tremcondra, and the subject site has no car parking at the front of the house, which is inadequate. The proposed development is an overdevelopment of the site. The proposed car parking layout is not accessible from an accessibility perspective. The double-storey height is out of character with existing development within the street and overbears on neighbouring properties. And the subdivision design is out of character with the neighbourhood. In response to the objections and advice from Council's Heritage Officer, as well as in discussion with Council Planner, the applicant made a request to amend the application following public notification. The amendment made the following changes to the application. The proposed garage was reduced in height on boundary from 5.1 metres to 3.2, and the overall height reduced from 7.4 metres to 7.06 metres, with the first floor level of the garage recessed from the ground floor. The number of bedrooms in each dwelling was reduced from 3 bedrooms and a study to 3 bedrooms and a guest room, replacing what was previously a storage area in dwelling 1, and from 3 bedrooms and a guest room, amended to 2 bedrooms and a guest room on the first floor of the garage in dwelling 2. The overall building height was also reduced from 8.42 metres to 7.17 metres, and a streetscape elevation plan was submitted and is highlighted at page 17, reference TP 6.1 of the submitted development plans. This all occurred on the 31st of March 2021, and these are the plans that we're currently under assessment and decision made against. The amended application was circulated to objectors. No objections were withdrawn in response to the amended plans, and in terms of consultation, received many phone calls from objecting properties in the applicant during the time from circulation of amended plans to the time of decision. Unfortunately, no roundtable consultation was arranged, primarily due to a large number of submissions and difficulty organising consultation, primarily due to the inability to meet in person at this current point in time. However, many discussions were had with both the applicant and objectors in an attempt to understand the key concerns and whether there was a way to find an outcome to appease all parties. The revised plans were also discussed informally with Council's Heritage Advisor, Dr. David Rowe, and it was agreed that the designs had not adequately addressed the initial comments and recommendations. As the existing dwelling was to be removed, the proposed dwelling remained primarily in its original semi-detached 2-storey form, with only a slight reduction in overall building height, and a 2-lot subdivision formed part of the development plans. In summary, it's considered the proposed development is not supported by applicable and state and local policies, as the development departs from the existing and well-established neighbourhood character of the area, and this area is zoned neighbourhood residential zone schedule 2 and affected by a heritage overlay. Conflicts with the overarching state and local policies which encourage new development to positively contribute to the neighbourhood character of the surrounding existing development, and the minor benefit of additional housing supply does not outweigh the disbenefits of the design in its setting, which is enhanced by both the zoning of the land being zoned as an incremental change area and protected under a heritage overlay due to the important cultural and aesthetic contribution the area makes to Geelong's sense of identity and history of residential development. It's considered that strategic plans guiding housing deliverables have adequately considered the needs of the municipality in maintaining an appropriate future housing supply through infill and medium density development, which has been clearly defined in other areas of the municipality through residential growth zone, activity centre zone, and general residential zone. In making a decision on the application and having considered all the matters required under the Planning Environment Act, it was resolved to recommend Council refuse to grant a planning permit for demolition of an existing dwelling in heritage overlay and construction of 2 dwellings in 2-lot subdivision for the reasons set out in my planning report.
Thanks, Tom. Councillors, at this stage, do you want to ask any questions of Tom? Tom will be staying with us throughout the session, so if we've got some questions, we can. Councillor Aiken?
Tom, if this revised plan is rejected, what do we anticipate will come of the site? Will it just sit undeveloped, or what will actually happen, do you think? I mean, it's a speculative question and hypothetical, but what to anticipate would happen?
Yeah, I think looking at the relevant policies, the heritage policy, design guidelines, there's scope, and my report speaks to the scope being that development can occur on this site. It's just that there is a heightened controls around due to the zoning and the heritage policies that it needs to be a well-considered design, whether that incorporates the existing building. There's been no information or evidence submitted that shows how intact structurally, I suppose, the house is currently, but there's certainly opportunities to infill, which is evident within Lunan Avenue, and it's definitely not to say that development can't occur on this site. It's just that development as proposed is too visually prominent and has a negative impact on the cultural significance of this area.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Contra.
Thanks, Councillor Grisbeck. Just a few questions, Tom. Thanks for your explanation. In terms of the setback, when I look at Figure 2 in page, 13, I think it is, page 11 of the council officer's report, and it demonstrates where the general setbacks are for that street. It seems that what's being proposed is either in line or even a little more generous than some of the homes that are already there. Is that something you could clarify? I'm just looking at the aerial photo that we've been provided.
Yep. So I guess this location is on the edge, the western edge of the heritage precinct. So what that means is it's visually prominent in terms of a contrast between areas that are delineated and protected by a heritage overlay and areas that aren't. And it's the combination of street setback proposed with projecting dormers that have a presence on the street. In terms of my assessment under clause 55, 6.1 metres requires a variation to the particular standard of clause 55, and in combination with the form of the dwelling, it was considered that had a real presence on the street, and that presence was to the detriment of the heritage precinct in its entirety, which is partly due to the location on the western edge of the heritage area.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Look, we're pretty simple people here. We're not engineers or architects, so I really would like just if you could keep the language quite simple for me at least. But just to ask that question again, so I think I understand what you're saying, but the setback that's being suggested that this development will have, which is 6.1, it seems, at least from the drawing, as I said, or the picture, that it's at least as generous or more so than some of the homes that are already there. Could you just clarify that? Are some of those homes at more than 6.5 or less than 6.5? Are some of them protruding more into the setback? Because that's how it looks when you look at the photo.
Yeah, I think probably what's best to look at is the submitted plans. So the site analysis plan submitted by the applicant shows a range of setbacks which do differ slightly. So there's a setback of 6.33 metres to the dwelling to the west, and the dwelling to the east is 7.24 metres, and there's others varied setbacks within the street, but the general theme is they retain around the 6 to 7 metre setback mark. So in terms of its setback, in isolation, that's one consideration that is relatively consistent, but in combination with the form and scale and massing of the development, the setback, which does reduce to 5 metres when you add the veranda, can have a visual prominent presence on the street.
Okay, thanks. That answers that question. So it's consistent with some of the others, but I get what you're saying. A couple of questions I had was when you talk about out of character, and again, I'm a layperson, but I've driven the street 3 or 4 times. It seems to be a real mix of Federation to homes built in the 70s with brick veneer, homes built in the 80s that you would see in Highton and other areas of the city of Greater Geelong, homes built in the 2000s. So when you talk about the character of the street, the actual street looks quite mixed in character. If you compare it to, say, other heritage areas like Girton Crescent in Manifold Heights, where it's really consistent with the homes, this one here, it's really different compared to what I've seen over the last 10 or 12 years when we've been dealing with these heritage areas. It's a real mixed bag.
Is there...
So what is the character of the street? We're saying it doesn't meet the character. And again, I'm only a layperson, so I'm trying to understand how this dwelling that's been proposed, which is built in weatherboard that looks like a single dwelling, which looks similar to me to some of the others, how it's out of character. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, Councillor Contal, just in that sense. So Lunan Avenue only has one other dwelling in there that is 2 dwellings on the lot. That was approved back in 2002. That's at number 20 Lunan Avenue. Also Grandview, which is the street to the north, of course, only has one other that has 2 dwellings in the lot, and Bell only is single detached dwellings. So when you talk about the character, it's a really good question. The character is covered under clause 22.22, and as it's been shown, Dr. David Rowe has said that this is what's important about the area, is the single-storey detached dwellings, as well as the mix of the architectural styles.
Okay. No, that's good. Thanks. So it's the 2 dwellings that's sort of the point, I guess, that you're trying to make, that it's out of character.
Appreciate what you're saying. It's been tried to look like one dwelling by combining the 2 together.
Yeah, it certainly looks like one.
Can understand that, but the subject site is 15.33 metres wide, and this dwelling itself as one dwelling is 13.7 metres of that 15.3 metres. So it's actually occupying a very large percentage of the frontage. So as much as it tries to disguise, I guess is probably the right word, to look like a single-storey dwelling, it actually probably looks bulkier than what it is. And you can disguise it, but I guess the old adage, pardon me, I'm a bit simple too, if it quacks, it's normally a duck. So it's one of those ones where you can make it look like 2 dwellings, but it's really difficult to do. Yeah,
no, I appreciate your feedback, but I mean, that's obviously your opinion, but with all buildings that get redeveloped in heritage area zones, people are trying to make them look like the past. They're never going to be the past again because they're building them in the present. So I guess what they're trying to do, I assume, is to fit the character as we're encouraging them to do. That's what I'm assuming. The only last thing I wanted to ask was, because of the character and the heritage overlay is so important, and with all due respect to the current owners of the house, I think it's a real eyesore, to be quite honest, and it's disappointing that it's putting such a blight on that street at the moment. It needs something, that's for sure. But in our report, it says that the Geelong West Urban Conservation Study of 1986 does not identify the dwelling as having any significance on the heritage of the area. So it doesn't put much value on the heritage or the character, which is sort of opposing what we're trying to understand here.
I'd just say that that's the Geelong West study more so. So from our end, we're looking at the Tremcondra and Rippleside area, and we want to be specific about that particular clause. Sorry, Tom.
What I was going to say is that Heritage Overlay 1630, which applies to Rippleside and Tremcondra, is a heritage. The significance is the area as opposed to a single building. It's the characteristics defined of and that's that grid-like pattern, rear laneways, stylistic mix of Edwardian, Victorian, and California bungalow, predominantly single-story detached development that gives this area its heritage significance. So note that this particular site in isolation doesn't have a individual listing. It contributes to the area of Tremcondra and the broader neighbourhood, which is well defined in clause 22 of the heritage policy, referring to HO 1630. So, and this site also plays, as I've spoken earlier, an important part as an entry point to Lunan Avenue and the broader Tremcondra heritage area. So, primarily due to its western interface, it has a heightened importance in maintaining those characteristics, which show a time and sense of identity of Geelong as the region's developed over time, and that's the importance of HO 1630.
Okay, thanks. I might have other questions later, but thank you. I apologise, Kylie.
That's okay. That's okay. Very good. So any other questions of the officers before we head through to the objectors? No? Okay. Council support, would you mind popping through the first objector, please?
Thanks, Madam Chair. We're just entering Peter Loney into the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome, Peter. Welcome to the planning meeting. Can you hear us and see us?
I can. I will now just need to get out of listening to you on the web.
It's a couple of seconds delayed, so we'll give you a couple of seconds.
No, that's fine. I've done that now.
Excellent. Thank you and welcome to the Planning Committee. We've got approximately 3 or so minutes. You'll see a little timer go off on the corner. I'll probably jump in at some point, not to be too strong about the cut-off, but we've got a few to get through tonight. So
yeah, I imagine so. I've tried to keep my remarks short.
No problem. I'm going to give you the floor now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I now speaking to the panel?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
All right. I wish to support the Planning Office's recommendation that the application be refused. The COG planning scheme, including the Tremcondra Heritage Overlay, HO 1630, is drawn from the Victorian planning provisions, and both should be referred to in assessing this application. This is not a question of opposing change in a heritage area. Change can occur where it is respectful to and in harmony with the objectives and principles enshrined in the overlay. There are examples of such changes in the area and even within Lunan Avenue. It's noted that the applicant has modified the original application to better meet the overlay principles. However, the application before you still fails and must be refused. There remain at least 3 major issues that prevent the approval of the application. Firstly, demolition of the existing building. Second, subdivision of the existing lot into 2 lots. And thirdly, the semi-detached frontage of the proposed dwelling. Demolition of the building. 1 Lunan Avenue, as has been expressed, is an early 1900s building. Not heritage listed, but contributing to the overall of this area. It is in good condition, currently inhabited as a rental property. There are no apparent structural or safety risks that would require demolition, nor has the applicant asserted that there are. Refusal of a demolition permit would not prevent sensitive development of the property to take place, as has occurred at other dwellings. subdivision of the existing lot into 2 lots. This application to build 2 dwellings on the existing lot and subdivide the lot into 2 titles is specifically against HO 1630 objective, to quote, to retain the uniformity of scale of the area, including building separation and subdivision pattern, and against the stated HO 1630 principle that requires COG to encourage the existing allotment configuration to be retained. Semi-detached frontage of the proposed dwelling, HO 1630 specifically states, where a permit is required for a proposal, it is policy to promote buildings that incorporate the following design characteristics: detached single-storey, double-fronted buildings. Can I just conclude with this?
Yep.
The Heritage Advisor's view that the proposal was considered to have an adverse effect on the significance, character and appearance of the heritage area is significant. If approved, this type of development would become the new accepted precedent for future applications. It would have the potential to undermine the unique character and integrity of the area, and COG could clearly not approve it without undermining the integrity of its own planning scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. If you wouldn't mind just staying with us, we will just check if any councillors have any questions for you. Councillors? Councillor Aiken.
Peter, well done. You actually sounded like a planning officer of the City of Greater Geelong with your presentation. What I'd like to hear is what's your personal objection? You know, like why? I presume you're a neighbour within the precinct, and you know, like, so what are you? What is you've presented the clauses as to why it should be rejected, but what's your personal opinion about the proposed?
My personal opinion really doesn't count. The planning scheme does, Anthony. What is important here, and what is important to me, is the integrity of a very important built environment area of Geelong, one that your council says should be preserved. If I have a personal view or personal opinion, that is what it is. It is the preservation of one of this city's significant built environments.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you for your submission, Peter. We'll
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll join us on the live stream afterwards. Thank you. Council support, would you mind popping through the next one, please?
Madam Chair, Martin Wright has entered the meeting.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome, Martin. Welcome to the Planning Committee. You'll have about 3 or so minutes. You'll hear a little gong go off, but please feel free to start your submission and I'll jump in at some point. Thank you.
Wonderful. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Firstly, thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak to this matter tonight. As residents of the adjacent property, we're obviously extremely concerned by the applicant's proposal. In addition to fully supporting the findings and recommendations outlined in the Planning Officer's report, we'd also like to briefly share with the councillors the points that we expressed in our 2 separate submissions, our objections. My partner and I relocated our family from interstate in Geelong to 2019 to seek a regional life for our young children. We purchased the property at 3 Lunan Avenue, knowing that the property next door was not owner occupied and could certainly be redeveloped in the future. However, we were confident that the heritage overlay and planning policies for Tremcondra would protect any future overdevelopment. That the proposal doesn't conform to the heritage principles of this suburb will have major and detrimental impacts to the livability and amenity of our home. The applicant is proposing a subdivision with 2 separate dwellings with their own private entrances, dividing walls and fences, private open spaces and double-storey garages. The garages also include additional self-contained accommodation for guests, giving rise to the possibility of new properties being used for Airbnb short-term rentals. The size of the development is clearly too big for the site, covering 60%. There is a clear intent to extract maximum capital value from this property by overdevelopment, with little regard, in my opinion, to the neighbourhood amenity or impact on our livability. This is certainly not the sort of attitude we expected to encounter in Geelong. The applicant seeks a major planning variation to site setbacks to build right to the boundary on the eastern side adjacent to my property. The proposal seeks to build the boundary along 75% on the side of my house, which is completely at odds with the planning overlays in place. I would also question how this work could be carried out without access to the property on my side if we would object, which we would almost certainly do. The actual proposed property's front setbacks are 5 metres, and they've cleverly tried to disguise that they're more than that. So my property is set back 7.2 metres. The new dwelling should therefore be set back the same distance as the front setback of my property. One of the greatest concerns is that proposed development will have a substantial adverse impact on our livability because it will majorly encroach on our privacy, heavily reduce our backyard sunlight where our children play and our amenity, and detract from the natural light throughout our home due to major overshadowing. If you just clearly look at the shadow plans, at 2 p.m. in September, there was 100% shadowing of my entire west walls and 50% shadowing of my rear private space. At 3 p.m, this moves to 100% shadowing of our rear private open space. And this is the only green space where our children play. The applicant seeks to build the development through significant variations to the planning scheme, resulting in major non-compliances of boundary walls and boundary wall heights.
Thank you, Martin. Appreciate your submission. Councillors, any questions for Martin? Councillor Nelson.
I have a question, but it's with regard to the height, as Martin said. So you're concerned about the height, and I understand that, and I get that, living where I live. Is the building higher? Is the proposed building higher than the current building? Is that what's going on, or? Yeah,
significantly. It's a single-storey dwelling at the moment. They're proposing a double-storey, 2 lots, so basically almost a duplex. Yeah. On there, so it's going to run the entire length of my boundary wall, 75%, and just cast a shadow across my entire house and garden where the children play.
So my question, thanks, Martin. My question was to the officers: is the building height higher than what it currently is? Is that right?
Sorry, your question.
That's okay. Councillor Nelson's just got a question for the officers whilst you're here, Martin. Yep.
Sorry.
You're okay.
You're right, Martin. You're right.
Thanks, Councillor Nelson.
Is building height higher than the current building? Because I understand Martin's concerned about the overshadowing.
Yeah, yes, it is. So the existing building's a single-storey height. So this proposed dwelling is 2-storey in height with an overall building height of 7.17 metres. So at the ridge height of the single-storey dwelling would be approximately 4 metres. So you're looking at an increase of around 3 metres.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you, Martin. We appreciate you coming along. Councillor Support. Thank you, Martin. Councillor Support, would you pop through the next one, please?
Madam Chair, Fiona Gregory is being entered into the meeting.
We'll just hang on for Fiona's audio to join. Hello, Fiona. Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome. Would you mind just muting the other session that you've got on the background there?
Muted, done, yes.
Thank you. That's okay. Welcome to the Planning Committee. We've got about 3 minutes for your presentation. You'll notice a little timer go off, yes. And I'll ask you just to wrap up after that. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, I'm Fiona. I'm a resident in Lunan Avenue, and I've objected, or my husband and I have both objected to this application. We don't believe that the house should be demolished. We've heard people say that it's not actually a contributory building, but there have been other dwellings in Lunan Avenue that haven't actually been nominated as contributory, and they've changed hands. People have ripped off fake bricks. They've ripped off 1960s cream bricks, returned the houses to what they originally were, and they're now making a significant contribution to the heritage feel and look of Leunan Avenue. Most of the houses in the street have been renovated. They've had new extensions put on the back. They've had the amenity inside upgraded, but the presentation to the street has still remained to the pretty much original look of the house. Many of them are two-storey, but as you walk along Leunan Avenue, they don't appear to be two-storey. We have a two-storey rear to our home. Many people walk into our house and look quite surprised and go, oh my goodness, is your house two-storey? Because from the street, it just doesn't look that way. People this evening have spoken about the setback, and there's a technical way of measuring the setback from the front wall of the house, and then the veranda doesn't get counted. But many of the houses in Leunan Avenue only have a half veranda. So they're measuring from the front of the house, but this one's measuring from the wall of the house, and then there's the veranda built in front of it the whole way across. So it gives the appearance of having a much less setback than what technically the building regulations require it to be measured as. I don't believe that it should be allowed to have a subdivision either, because every house in that section of Leunan Avenue has a 50-foot frontage, with the exception of one, and that's always been that way, with a laneway on the end, and that's the other end of the street and on the other side of the road. I think also that the plan they put forward is just a monster of a house that goes from the east boundary to the west boundary, and as Martin said, 70% of it's on his fence line. So yeah, they're my reasons for thinking that it shouldn't get a permit to be built and subdivided.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillors, any questions for Fiona, please? Fiona, you're getting off lightly tonight. Thank you. I appreciate your submission, and we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Support, would you mind popping through the next person, please?
Madam Chair, Pam Colenso is entering the meeting.
Thank you. Welcome, Pam. There we are. We can see you. Thank you, and we can hear you. Welcome to the planning meeting. You'll have around 3 minutes or so, and then you'll hear a gong, and I'll come and just ask you to wrap up if you go over that time.
Okay.
Thank you very. The floor is yours. Thank you. Pam, you can hear me?
Are you there?
Yes, we can hear you. You can hear
Okay.
us? Yep. So
I can hear you.
Go for it.
All right. Hello, I am Pam Colenso, a proud member of the Tremcondra neighbourhood and past member of the Tremcondra Heritage Group. The application to remove, subdivide and build 2 adjoining houses and large garages on a 600 metre square block is a distressing prospect. The proposed build does not conform to the Heritage Overlay Statement of Significance of the Tremcondra area. Tremcondra is a coveted enclave of approximately 200 houses and 600 residents. It is the smallest suburb in Geelong, and the majority of houses are over 100 years old. It is well known as a heritage significant area. Owners in this prized suburb cherish the aesthetics of the streetscape, and this is obvious as many of us continue to improve and maintain our residences and large gardens in keeping with the original character of the area. This has also resulted in low sale turnover in the suburb, even though there is a high demand to buy into the area and substantial prices being attained on any recent sales. In the 20 years that my family has resided in Tremcondra, we have observed many residents of the area passionately renovating their properties back to heritage standards. Our own house had been severely altered in the 1960s, replacing the front lead-light windows and doors with additions made to the front and rear, very much out of character with the rest of the house. Our vision when we bought it was to return it to its former glory. We did not apply to demolish and rebuild. We were aware that we had bought into a heritage overlay district, and with the help and advice of our architects, and Dr. David Rowe, the heritage advisor to City of Greater Geelong, we transformed a very ugly house in a very prominent position on Beach Parade into a stately home again. This resulted in a National Trust Award in 2010 and praise from the original family's children, Bill and John Holt. If the application is approved to allow the property to be subdivided into 2 titles, I have serious concern this decision will set precedent for developers to buy into the area and change the streetscape irreparably.
Thank you very much, Pam. Councillors, questions for Pam? Councillor Aitken.
Pam, I'm a little confused with the statements because I'm actually aware there was a Tudor Manor house on the Esplanade about at number 27, which was actually the Glover family home. Now that's actually been totally demolished.
Yeah, sad, isn't it?
And so I'm confused that we're being said that we're not allowing, we shouldn't be allowing heritage properties. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's not a question to yourself, and it's a question about planning officers.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah, so maybe that's what I'll do. I'll direct it back to the officers because it's not, because you've just made me start to think more about it. So Tom or John, can you explain to me why we allowed that the Tudor Manor that was on the Esplanade at I think it's number 27, that was Glover family home, has actually been able to be totally demolished under the overlay? Is the issue about subdivision and not the actual heritage? Is that what the issue is here? Because we've allowed that prominent structure along the Esplanade to be demolished.
Tom, would you mind answering that question?
Yeah, look, Councillor Aitken, it's really hard to respond to a specific application, so without knowing sort of the details. But the heritage policies applying to the site, as well as the Borough Charter, which sort of guides heritage considerations, promote the retention of buildings that contribute to heritage areas where possible. So where possible, that means if a dwelling is in a state that it just simply can't be saved and it's a danger, then unfortunately, that building would need to be demolished. So look, I'm sure there is rhymes and reasons to why applications, and they're always merit-based. So it's really hard to comment on this one in particular, but certainly what I can say is that the clause 22.22 seeks to retain intact examples of heritage buildings, being Victorian, Edwardian or Californian bungalows in this area of Tremcondra.
Yeah, I mean, because that was a prominent, I appreciate your answer and I thank you for that. That was actually a prominent residence, and it actually had a beautiful circular staircase that was quite unique, that actually ran on the outside of that building, that was, for me, was part of the heritage value of that whole area. And I'm really fascinated now that if we're saying no, we don't support demolition of this building because of the heritage overlay and the character, why we've actually allowed that to occur along the Esplanade at that number 27. And I can understand why this is causing conflict and confusion for people, because I'm now a bit confused, because I thought that building certainly didn't look like it was falling down. That prominent building looked like it was quite a significant family traditional home that was on that site, but now it's a cleared site. And my understanding is the building that's coming up is quite an ultra-modern structure that's being put onto the Esplanade. But thank you, Tom.
Another question for you, Councillor Aitken. 27 is not covered by a heritage overlay for whatever reason. So therefore, 27, the Esplanade, did not have a heritage overlay and does not require a planning permit for demolition. So it's not in the heritage area.
But we know it as Tremcondra for a lay person. Is that?
Yeah, so it's not covered by a heritage area and didn't require a planning permit for demolition.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Aiken. Councillor Maloney, you had your hand up first.
As Deputy Chair of the Heritage Portfolio.
Looks like Councillor Maloney's... Sorry, you're breaking up there, Councillor Maloney. All right, we will come back to Councillor Maloney in 2 seconds. Councillor Nelson.
What John had said about that property. Unfortunately, it was demoed. Can you hear me okay? Oh, no worries.
Not sure where Councillor Maloney's gone. Councillor Nelson, feel free to go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just want to ask John a question. Is 55 Princess Highway Service Road within the designated area? Because I see there's two of the ugliest townhouses I think I've ever seen on that site, which is probably, I don't know, 100 metres from 1 Lunan Avenue.
That also is not covered by a heritage overlay there, Councillor Nelson.
So where is the boundary for the heritage overlay? Is it just 1 Lunan Avenue, or is it Tremcondra, or is it certain parts of Tremcondra?
Most of Tremcondra is covered. In terms of 27 the Esplanade, that's the first house or the last house that's not covered by the overlay. I haven't had a look at 55 Princess Highway of how much it extends. All I can tell you is it's not covered by a heritage overlay. But the overlay does cover along Bell Parade, of course, and it does cover along, as we know, Lunan Avenue and the Esplanade, and also covers Grandview Grove as well. So it covers the wider area there.
Well, it's in between Lunan Avenue and Grandview Grove.
Just to jump in, Councillor Nelson, it's the boundary, the western boundary. So these properties front Melbourne Road. It's the rear laneway that separates. So you've got a small pocket of Lunan Avenue, Grandview Grove, Wattle Tree Road, Tremcondra Avenue on the western side. That's on the western side of the rear laneway that are not part of the heritage overlay. So 1 Lunan Avenue, that's the starting point, that western interface. And
1A Lunan Avenue is not part of it.
Is not part of it. Yep. So that laneway there is the cut-off point for the heritage area, and extends down southward down to Tremcondra Avenue.
Okay. So can you answer me why 20 to 22 was has 2 units on it then?
In Lunan Avenue?
Yeah, in Lunan Avenue, yeah.
Yeah. Believe, John, you can probably speak to that better than I can.
Actually, that's a great question, Councillor Nelson. In 2002, council received an application for that site, obviously some time ago. The site at the time was vacant and 2 dwellings were proposed to be built on it. Council refused that application at the time. Yep. It was refused and went to VCAT. VCAT determined at that particular time that it was a vacant site and that the 2 dwellings on there were in tandem arrangement, and that those 2 dwellings were single story, and the Tremcondra area was recognised for its single story attributes. So it was determined in 2002 to allow that. Council was represented by Warwick Nelson at the time, and also Lorraine Huddle represented council as a heritage advisor at the VCAT hearing.
Thanks, John. It looks like the house, I'm just going off Google Maps, and it looks like the house 3 houses up is a brand new house as well, constructed by Mark Gatwick Architects. Is that a new dwelling there as well? It looks like it from Google Maps.
I'd have to take that question on notice and come back to you.
And my final question with regard to neighbourhood character, where is it? Tom said that there weren't many houses that were 2-story. So I was just trying to find out how many houses were 2-story in that street. I've counted 6 out of 24 so far, including the main house, which in Lunan Avenue, which is 2-story as well. So I'm trying to understand, do we like 2-story houses or we don't like 2-story houses when we've allowed 6 of them there, and yet the main house in Lunan Avenue is a 2-story house. So I'm just, there's no consistency. I'm trying to find consistency, and it just doesn't seem that there
I
is.
can help you find some consistency. So from our end, first and foremost, the controls came in when the new planning scheme came in 1999. So depending on the age of those double-storey houses, also understanding that they are single homes, not two dwellings on a lot. That's really important to acknowledge as well. And importantly too, is to look at Planning Practice Note 43, which the state government released of what is determinative of neighbourhood character. And neighbourhood character includes 5 dwellings either side of each of the proposal. So in this particular case, we can go wide if we want as the test, and we do in the heritage overlay. But when we look at it from a neighbourhood character, we look at the 5 dwellings alongside it. In terms of those 6 dwellings, as you discussed, I'd need to have a look at the ages and the details. But as discussed, they are single detached dwellings, and some of them with a double story have a recessed double story with maybe 1 dormer. In this particular case, there's quite a number of dormer aspects to the dwelling.
I'm not sure what you think neighbourhood character is, John, because your planning department have allowed a massive development on the south end of South Valley Road in a residential zone for an aged care facility, and you think that's part of the neighbourhood character of Highton. So,
Councillor Nelson, we might just concentrate on this one tonight.
I like to say our council, we're all one together, we're all in this together, Councillor Nelson, but I can come back to that.
I don't understand what John's version of neighbourhood character is. Anyway.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillor Mansfield?
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. I just wanted to clarify, just to check that my understanding is correct, just based on some of the comments that or questions Councillor Nelson was asking around heritage overlay and new buildings. My understanding is that a heritage overlay means that there's nothing really preventing you, redeveloping a building, provided that the frontage is still consistent with and the overall design is consistent with the heritage the character of that area, as opposed to a heritage listed building, which has to be retained. The structure of it has to be retained. Can we just get some clarification on that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Councillor Mansfield. So with regards of the heritage area, as you said, we encourage buildings to be upgraded, as Pam Colenso has just detailed with her property at Bell Parade, to bring them up to a modern standard maybe at the rear. And as you said, keeping the front 2 rooms is really important from a heritage area to maintain the existing architectural style that has been there for some time. With regards of buildings that are individually listed, they're listed on the Victorian Heritage Register, and there is a statement of significance as to why those buildings are significant. Significance isn't just the architectural style. It could be the era, it could be the culture, it could be the person that lived in the building as well. So significant takes on many different forms, and we're, I guess, a beneficiary of what we've got and custodians of the heritage going forward. And those details are contained in each of the Victorian Heritage Database registers.
Yeah, so this building has a heritage overlay, as opposed to a heritage listing, which means that the owners could demolish the building, build a new building, provided that it was consistent, that the appearance of the new building was consistent with the heritage style of the area. And as much of the frontage is retained as possible. Is that?
Yeah, the owners could do that. Look, our heritage policy asks to give evidence why one should be demolished, and we encourage applicants to provide their own heritage architect's advice, not just to rely on council's heritage architect, but they can apply for that, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm just trying to understand why some new buildings might be built, why there might be buildings on the street that are being, renovated at the moment. So it may be that they've been approved because the new design was consistent with the heritage.
Absolutely. Our heritage architect looks at all of those buildings and all of those designs, and we go into detail to make sure that we work with the applicants the same as I said with Pam. She worked with David Rowe on the details of her building.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillor Contra?
Yeah, thanks. I know there's been a lot of questions, Councillor Grisbeck, but this is a pretty important matter, I guess, and we're just trying to, I suppose, clear up some of the confusion around, for us at least, or at least me, around the character. I've got Google Maps in front of me as well, and I suppose number 5 Lunan looks like a very new house, and there's been a few comments made about the bulk of the development. Number 5, first of all, doesn't look Federation, looks quite modern and is quite a significant building on that side, albeit single story. And then right on the other side is the humongous house on the corner of the Esplanade and Lunan, and which is a rendered building. That looks like it takes up most of the land that's there as well. So I'm really finding it hard to find consistency. Could maybe John or Thomas give us some feedback on that? Because they look like newer buildings. They look like they've been built, at least in the last 5-10 years, I imagine.
A heritage area is not an area that it inhibits development. It can occur, but there's important heritage design guidelines and clauses within the planning scheme that should guide development, and that's using comments as well from Council's Heritage Advisor, as well as engaging someone that's suitably qualified. Certainly not that development's inhibited in a heritage area. It can occur. It's just that it needs to be designed in a way that doesn't take away from or become more visually prominent than defined heritage characteristics of particular sites. Again, reinforce that clause 22 is quite explicit in what the characteristics of the Tremcondra neighbourhood is. And that's a grid-like pattern, predominantly single-story development, stylistic mix of early 20th century buildings. And there are many examples in there of two-story additions, but they are subservient in nature. The difference with this one is that the projecting dormers clearly show that the development's two-story, and it's two-story throughout its depth. And that departs from what the character is within Tremcondra. And that's been assessed and shown in both multiple site visits that I've undertaken in assessing the application, through submitted plans, and through comments through Council's Heritage Advisor.
Thank you, Councillor Contell. We might let Pam go. Thank you, Pam, for joining us for that. Councillor Maloney, you're okay at this point? Thumbs up, beautiful. Thank you, Pam. Councillor Support, do we have any further objectors to come in?
Madam Chair, there's nobody else in the waiting room who is on our list. I do have, though, Ivan and Anthony both in the room, if you would like me.
Sure, that would be great if you could pop through the applicants. Thank you. Just give them a few minutes to get into the room. Thank you, Pam. Council Support. Excellent. Thank you, Ivan. Doesn't like to hear our voices back at us. Welcome. Can we so we've got Ivan here as one of the applicants, and all right, so one of them is having issues with audio. Anthony, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello. Would you mind popping your camera on, please?
Okay. Yep.
Excellent.
Hi.
That's just gone again, but that's okay. Camera's off. So, Anthony, can you hear us? Gotta love technology, don't you? Hi.
Hi, how are you?
You're Karen.
Yes, I am.
Hi, Karen. Welcome to the Planning Committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, everybody.
Would you mind turning off whatever you've got on in the background there so we can...
Yep. Thank you.
Anthony, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Perfect. We've got you both on. Okay. So what I'm going to do is allow you to sort of tag team if you like. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, so can you turn off your background watching of the...
Hello. Would you mind popping your camera on, please?
Okay, so I can hear the background still watching the previous one. Karen and Anthony, what I'm going to do is allow you guys to have 5 to 10 minutes to present your applicant's presentation, and you can sort of bounce off each other or however you wish to run that. So I'm going to give you the floor now. Thank you.
Okay, I suppose I'm not going to take very long. I just really wanted everybody to understand our intent as far as building and developing Lunan Avenue. I suppose I'll start from the start, and before I even engaged Anthony to employed him to do the property, the first thing I did was I actually rang the council because I wanted to know, first of all, was I able to demolish and was I able to subdivide? And the council told me that yes, I was able to subdivide and that I was able to demolish because it wasn't heritage listed. And so based on that outcome, I then took it on to engage Anthony and to develop something that was for us and for our future. Ivan and I are at the stage of our life where we're wanting to downsize. We're looking at a development that's a lot smaller than what we've got now, less of a carbon footprint. We want to be closer to town. We want to be able to exercise, walk. Obviously, the location allows for all of that. So we don't want to use our cars. We don't want to use anything that we don't have to. We plan to have our children living next door to us. And I suppose I'm confused just even listening tonight because I'm just a simple person. I'm not a developer. I've built one home 18 years ago that I live in now. And I suppose the consistency of what has been approved prior to what's being approved now, I suppose I don't understand. Like when council said I could demolish and I could subdivide, I thought that I would be able to do it. And to be honest, I'm shocked that I'm here now and that we're at this point in time. But I just really wanted to let you know that we plan to live in the residents. We don't plan to tenant them out. It's going to be a quality build. It's not, and I thought what we submitted was very much in keeping of the area. We tried to be really like we wanted the landscape, I suppose, to fit in with the rest of the street, and we wanted it to look lovely. We didn't want to go modern. We didn't want to do anything like that. And honestly, I thought it would just be approved. I know I'm green, and but that's really what I thought. And I'm sort of sitting here tonight and listening to all of the objectors and just going, wow. So but that is our intent, and I certainly, if I hadn't thought that I wouldn't have been able to subdivide and I wouldn't have been able to demolish, I probably never would have gone as far as I have, because I wouldn't have spent the money, which, to do it if that wasn't the case. So I suppose I'm a bit confused because when I rang, I got told that I was able to do both of those things. So yeah, so I'll let Anthony sort of step in to where he took it up.
Thanks, Karen. Over to you, Anthony. And you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Go for it.
Okay, beautiful. Firstly, I was taking a couple of notes just in relation to some of the things that I've heard. And one of the things that I wrote down was positively contribute to the neighbourhood. I think that this does. A lot of the comments were made that it was too visually dominant. It was going to stick out. Number one, it's right on the edge. It's abutting a laneway, and it's abutting where there's a whole heap of existing units. So it's actually going to make the neighbourhood look a lot better as people are entering it. The other point that everybody's also failed to mention is that there's a big nature strip out the front of the proposed property. There's a big tree on there. So the effect and the shock that everybody's talking about, once it's actually built, nobody will even notice that it's there because it's actually going to be concealed. I'm not sure if all the councillors had a chance. I actually responded to Tom's report because I felt it wasn't 100% correct. So I don't know. I still want to skim through that quickly just to point my points of view out, because I still believe, even though it's town planning and even though we got numbers on a lot of things which can be assessed, for some reason council is choosing not to see the numbers the way that we see them, and things that are that need to be assessed by someone else we've actually had a look at. So the two major points are the heritage response on the plans and also the assessing of the plans. The reason I wrote this response was because in two locations on the heritage response, and I know it could have probably been the original response to the original plans, but the response was for the original plans. So all that they talk about the bulk and the setbacks was all about the first set of plans that were submitted. So I felt that this was incorrectly represented. So I think that all those comments in relation to heritage, I've read every one of those clauses, and I know exactly what the people are talking about. But everybody seems to pick and choose the bits that they want to try and get the result that they want. But if you look at the whole heritage clause, I don't think we're actually contributing to the area, and that's the whole thing we're contributing. The next, I just wanted to go through all the assessment criteria just quickly. The neighbourhood character. We were concerned about this because I've had a couple of issues with City of Greater Geelong town planning in relation to neighbourhood character. So the only way around this, I thought, was to actually engage some consultants from Melbourne to do an assessment on the neighbourhood character. They came back with the report, which is also attached, saying that they're quite comfortable in being able to support this application if it does go to VCAT. So I don't want to sound too negative, but we're lining ourselves up that if council chooses to refuse this application, we're quite prepared to go to VCAT, and we've got our neighbourhood character consultants and we've got a heritage consultant also aligned that we're quite prepared. Integration with street objective. This is very, very funny because on our original applications, we had no fence in between the dwellings. Council asked us to put the 1.8 metre fence in there, and now they've used it as an excuse to say we don't comply to the application. So I don't understand what's going on there. Street setback objective. The setback has been mentioned numerous times, and as Eddie pointed out on page 10 of the council's report, actually clearly shows how there is a varying setback throughout the street. And it was funny how Tom actually only mentioned the houses either side, one which is 6.3 and the other one was 7.3. He didn't mention the houses that were set back 4 metres and 4.5 metres from the street, because again, they pick and choose the bits and pieces that they want to try and make it sound a lot worse than what it is. Building height objective. This one also I struggle to understand, because where obviously there's been two versions of the plan, and Tom actually, the numbers that Tom read out were correct. Initially, we had a dwelling that was 8.4, and now we've reduced the height down to 7.1. But the allowable height in the area is 9 metres. So we're almost 2 metres lower than the maximum allowable height. So for them to say that we don't comply to the height objective, I don't think is correct. And they're going to say that the heritage policy says it needs to have the single-storey form. But we've gone to a lot of trouble to ensure that the house has a single-storey form. The pitching height of the first floor, the majority of the first floor is encased within the roof form, and we've just projected the gables out to create some extra space. Then this was just simple little things like they said in relation to permeability and stormwater. They said we didn't comply. And there's a storm assessment was provided with the plans. So for this to actually still remain in the report, I think is wrong. It's actually making it look like the report is wrong, or that we've done the wrong thing, when obviously we haven't done the wrong thing. Side and rear setbacks. We've actually, all the side and rear setbacks comply, and yet this is still in the report saying that we don't comply. So I don't, like, to me, this is wrong, and it shouldn't be in the report. Walls on boundary. The neighbour next door said, he made a statement, 70% of his fence line. Okay, we're proposing the wall to be 1.4 metres longer than the allowable. So 1.4 metres, that's not a lot. So I understand his concern in relation to having a wall on the boundary, but in actual fact, it's going to be a wall is something permanent that's going to be nice and clean and easy for, it will actually enhance what it's going to look like on his side of the property. It'll just be a lot better than a paling fence that's currently there. Again, the dwelling to entry objective, they also again brought up the 1.8 metre fence that they insisted we put in. So again, why is that in there? Storage objective. I know it was also mentioned in the report that we have shown storage, but they're not sure if it doesn't comply. Like we've allowed the storage, and it does comply. I've just got a couple of more things. Design detail. One of the basic things in relation to design detail is facade articulation, detailing, windows and door proportions, roof form and verandas, eaves. We have all of this. So I'm not sure what's going on. Am I still on? Because my image is gone.
No, you're still on, and just make a final wrap-up comment.
Okay, yeah, the last one is, I just wanted to talk about car parking and garages, because it was one of the points, 55.056 was about, 55.6 in relation to car parking. We actually tried, the garages are wider than normal, the accesses are wider than normal. We actually can get those cars in. We've shown the turning templates that we normally use. I asked engineering to provide us with templates, which they didn't give us. So to me, as far as I'm concerned, the car parking works. And if they had concerns, they should have provided us with templates, so then we could actually get us a proper solution. But as far as I'm concerned, it works. So that's it. If there's any questions, I'm willing to answer them.
Thank you, Anthony. Councillors, Councillor Mansfield, question.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Anthony. This is probably a question for you. Just with respect to the overshadowing issues that were raised by the residents at 3 Lunan Avenue. Just wondering if you could, I don't know, just provide a response to those concerns that were raised.
I can provide a response, but it's a planning response as opposed to a personal response. The planning response to this is overshadowing. We need to assess the overshadowing and how much overshadowing it has on the adjoining dwelling. In a situation where the people at the rear have got a large yard, they still get to enjoy, planning-wise, their yard is big enough for them to maintain the amount of required space in relation to overshadowing. If that was a unit next door where their private open space was very small and we overshadowed it, then we would have had an issue. But due to the house next door having such a big yard, it actually works to our benefit and to the planning benefits to allow for the overshadowing in the back. It's not like it's. I've had this question plenty of times, and if their backyard was a lot smaller, then there's a calculation that we need to work out on how much sun they're gonna retain. But due to their backyard being big, and I'm sure if it wasn't the case, the city planners would have asked me to work out the calculation. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I've had to do it in the past.
I understand what you're saying. So technically, because they've got a large yard, the overshadowing isn't an
issue.
Isn't an issue, but as you said, from a personal level, it means that there will be an overshadow. You know, that it still may impact them, but it's not necessarily a planning problem.
Yes. It's nothing that's justifiable through the planning standards.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if they're going to object on overshadowing, if it goes to VCAT, they're going to look at the standards. They're going to say, why are we here?
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Mansfield, any further questions? Councillor Mansfield, no further questions? Any other councillors have questions at this point? Councillor Nelson.
My question was the same as Councillor Mansfield's about that overshadowing. I'm concerned about that, but happy with the response. So thanks, Anthony, and thanks, Councillor Mansfield.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Contel.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. I've got a question of the officers again, if I could, and it's in relation to the height. And so I'd like them to clarify the point that Anthony Valia made in relation to height. So I understand that from what Anthony said, the height is at some 7 metres, is it? Or
7.12 metres now.
7.12, and he also stated that there is a maximum allowable height in that area and that this dwelling's below it. Can you confirm that that's the case, or give some clarification to that whole point?
Yeah, I can, Councillor Contel. Thank you for that. And thank you, Anthony. Look, as a qualified town planner, myself and Tom are, we can let you know that what Anthony's referring to is the standard and not the objective. So under clause 55, under the height objective, the objective says to ensure that the height of buildings respects the existing or preferred neighbourhood character. That is the objective. It does not have a measurable quantity. So when we refer to the existing or neighbourhood character, we look at what is in the statement in the heritage overlay to see what the existing and preferred character is. In the heritage overlay, it talks about a single story character. So when we say that it does not meet the height objective, we stand by that. In this particular zone, which is a neighbourhood residential zone, one can apply to build up to 9 metres, but does not necessitate that one will be supported at that particular level when you look at the objective and the other policies. It can be complex, I understand, but there are two very different phrases there, the objective and the standard. I hope that sort of clarifies.
Yeah, it does. I guess the thing I keep getting confused about is the consistency. So what about in terms of, Councillor Nelson mentioned other 2-storey houses. Where are they at in terms of the, the objective, the height?
Yeah, look, with each particular house, we'd need to have a look at the age of those houses to see when they were constructed. And as I said earlier, we're talking about single-storey dwellings as opposed to 2 dwellings here. So therefore, we start to look at things like the subdivision. Is it appropriate? And we start to look at things like the bulk that's there for 2 dwellings. So it's not just about the height. We've got to look at the cumulative effect of the height in addition with the other considerations.
Just to jump in there, in terms of the standard around building height, it talks about changes of building height between existing buildings and new buildings being graduated. So I think in terms of my assessment, which has been mentioned, I've considered the plans that were submitted on the 31st of March 2021 are the plans that I was assessed, and the streetscape elevation submitted shows the proposed dwelling compared to the existing dwelling, and my determination was that it wasn't graduated. It was a change from 2-storey to single, where it needed to be a more gradual approach.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, John. Councillor Contel, any other questions?
No, thank you, Councillor Grisbeck.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors of the applicants? All right. We might thank the applicants for their submissions, and now we'll look to do the deliberation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions? I do have a couple of questions for either John or Tom in relation to just sort of my uneducated necessarily in planning terminology, but in terms of what is in the street and where the heritage overlay comes in terms of the where it comes to. So question, off Melbourne Road, I'm looking at Google Maps, off Melbourne Road, you've got Loonan Avenue, 59, for example, of Melbourne Highway, then you've got 1A Loonan Avenue, and then you've got the sort of the road, and then there's number 1, where the site that we're looking at. Where does the heritage overlay come to? You mentioned before, does it come to that laneway?
Yeah, so it's the west, so where 1A boundary is, the start of the laneway going east, that's the delineation of the heritage area. That rear lane.
Okay, so the heritage doesn't cover that frontage in terms of from Melbourne Road.
Correct.
So when we talked about the entrance to the historical area, the entrance is not the entrance from Melbourne Road to the historical area.
Correct. It's the starting point, the intersection between the laneway and Loonan Avenue, and also the associated roads moving south.
It seems to me quite hard to understand when you talk about an entrance to an area that is set back from where you would automatically think of an entrance to an area, for example. John is sharing his screen. John, what are you doing to me here? Would you mind taking that off just for 2 seconds while I just finish my question? Sorry. So Tom, where we've got, we've explained in terms of the double, so the 2 subdivisions at 20 and 22 Loonan Avenue. If we were to look at, I think, number 5 and number 23, number 5 seems to take up a fair proportion of the block. So how does that relate to what is proposed here at number 1? Because they look like that they would take up the similar amount of space.
Yeah, so I guess first and foremost, it's a single dwelling at 5, and that's the difference or departure in this particular proposal. I can see that it's a substantial footprint. It's set back further, looking at the street, so it's retaining a similar setback, but it remains a detached single house. It might be a big one, but it remains a single house that's detached, and that's the characteristics of Loonan Avenue in particular, but also the broader Tremcondra Heritage Precinct.
Okay, I guess a layman's terms, it does make a lot of sense to me when you talk about the size of the block in terms of the area that it takes up in that. The double-storey nature of some of the other dwellings in that street, what's the height of those double-storey? Do you know any of the heights of those double-storey properties?
What I know is, and it's through response from Dr. David Rowe, our heritage advisor, was that 2-storey additions are an acceptable design solution in Loonan Avenue. It's just that they must remain subservient in nature, and how many developments within Loonan Avenue have done that is by setting it back. So the first front half of the buildings would remain single story, and then the additions that are double story would increase in height. So you're predominantly projecting out a single story element, and I can confirm that double story is typically around 7.5 metres on average.
Okay, thank you. That's my questions done. Any other questions, councillors, before we would look to make a decision? Okay. Councillor Nelson.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get, I think it was Tom. Was it Tom?
Yes, Councillor Nelson.
Oh, sorry, Tom. There you are. Sorry. I'm just trying to understand why you keep saying that the two-story dwellings need to be subservient to the others. I understand it, but I'm trying to work out why the main house in this street is a massive upfront, is anything but subservient. I'm just trying to understand why that is, Tom.
because it's Lunan House, so that was the homestead of this particular area. And speaking with Dr. David Rowe, this estate was developed on the back of the land on Lunan House. So Lunan House is absolutely a departure from what the streetscape is, and that's because it's the original homestead. So that's why it's not grid-like around Lunan House, because it was lots of space around it when it was developed in the 1800s. So it's big and bold because that was the original house and it was their land. The development through Tremcondra was intensified on the basis after Lunan House was developed.
Okay. So everything is subservient to Lunan House, really, then, isn't it?
That's a correct way to put it. Yeah. So Lunan House, they obviously decided to intensify development back in the day, and yet they want to maintain the prominence, and that's why it's at the end of Lunan Avenue, and the name Lunan Avenue comes to be because it led through from Melbourne Road to Lunan House.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Okay, councillors, I'm going to call if anyone wants to move the recommended or alternate. Councillor Contra.
Yes, Councillor Grisbeck, I'm really struggling with what's been put in front of us in terms of a report. So I would like to put forward an alternate. What others think about it will be up to them, but I just feel very uncomfortable discriminating against one family that's trying to build what looks like a reasonably respectable and respectful dwelling according to everything that's trying to be achieved in this area, being the character, against others that are, also looking very, very different to what's being recommended that we should be complying to. So having not sat in one of these meetings for a little while, I will put the alternative up and then ask Councillor Grisbeck that at some stage, I guess, I get to talk to it.
Yes, so Councillor Contel, you're going to move the alternate that councillors have got before them.
Well, I'm going to move an alternate that has been provided to me, but I will strike out one of the clauses that's in there, Councillor Grisbeck.
All right, let's look at what you want to move, Councillor Contel, and then I'll ask if you've got a seconder. So what is it that you particularly wanted to do in that alternate? Okay,
so the alternate, as it reads, is that the responsible authority, having considered all matters which the Planning and Environment Act 1987 requires, is to consider, decides to issue the notice of decision and grant the planning permit. It has a number of amendments that should be complied to, and it's item F that I would like to strike out.
Item 1F?
Yes.
Okay, so the alternate has is as we have been given previously without item F, and that means that G would turn to F. Councillors, that's the alternate that we've got in front of us. Councillor Contel, do you have a seconder for your alternate motion?
I don't know.
That's the question I'm putting to councillors. I'm happy to support that as a seconder, Councillor Contel. Councillors, I'm going to ask Councillor Contel to speak to his moving of this alternate motion, and then we'll go around the room. Councillor Contel.
Thanks, Councillor Grisbeck. There's certainly been a lot of discussion, and I really respect all of the residents that came forward and spoke. But what I suppose that did is really highlighted the fact of how confusing this whole matter is. Whether it was people that were against what's been put forward, or whether it was Karen, who's obviously the owner, she was clearly confused with the advice received from council. And I think what's very confusing is the character that we continue to talk to. It seems to be that the one point that is of concern is the double story. And yet there are other double stories in the street as well. The plans that certainly that I'm looking at look quite impressive, and as I indicated earlier, when you build in a heritage overlay area, you are always trying to appease the heritage overlay. I lived in a heritage overlay area, so you're never building modern. You're building what you can that makes it look in theme with what the heritage overlay is proposing. So I see that that's occurred here. The current dwelling is like the Ritz. Honestly, it is absolutely derelict, and I have a real fear that it will remain like that for years to come, unless we provide a way forward for what seems to be a sympathetic and respectful development. The building that's being proposed seems a lot more like a Federation style building than there's a lot of them that are actually in that street. The setback seems to at least be as generous or even better than some of the setbacks that are in that street from the photo that I could see. As per I mentioned, the Geelong West Conservation study equally suggests that the current building adds very little significance to the heritage. And there are the height, as it reads in the report also, whilst it may not be what John explained as the objective, it's certainly well below the maximum allowable height. And then once again, if you compare what's being proposed here with so many houses there, number 5 being one, the one on the corner of the Esplanade and Lunan is absolutely humongous, and it's a rendered building. It looks nothing like Federation, but all of these houses are beautiful. They are beautiful homes. I'm not suggesting they're not, but I don't know what makes this one any different. In fact, it looks like they've put a lot of work in to try to make it look like the theme being Federation. So I just find it really hard to discriminate against this family when others have been permitted to do similar or perhaps not even as aesthetically pleasing as what's being proposed. So I'll leave it at that, and councillors can make their own mind, as I'm sure they will.
Thank you, Councillor Contal. And just from a seconding perspective, I've read all the documents and went for a drive before lockdown, I must admit, because it is more than 5 k's away from my home. But before lockdown, and actually looked at a lot of the houses in that street. And from what I can see is proposed, it's not dissimilar to a lot of the places that are already there in Lunan Avenue. And when we look at even the garages on the back fence of the laneway, from a Google Map search, there is a lot of garages already on that back boundary. There are many developed, like if you look at the corner of Lunan Avenue, you've got a massive property and then a whole other sort of garage building that covers the whole length of the block. So I don't quite understand the reasoning. I get all the heritage viewing, but given the heritage overlay sits right on that corner where this building is, the entrance in, I think they've been sympathetic to the look and the Federation. It looks like it's going to be a lovely building, and that in my view, I support Councillor Contal in that. So councillors, I'm going to open it up to you for comment. Any other councillors wish to make comment at this point? Councillors, Councillor Nelson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm really torn on this because I'm sick of seeing beautiful homes in Highton disappear because people want to develop their properties. But I guess it's their property and they can develop it. But the properties that I'm concerned about are the ones that should be listed, and I'm not sure this one should be listed. I think a lot more homes should be listed, and I think we need to work with John on that. And I'll promise you, John, I'll give you a call soon to see how we can do that, both in the Greater Geelong, but more so in my patch, because I'm really disappointed that we're losing a lot of our heritage buildings. I just don't think this one is. It's not listed. It's in a state of disrepair, and will probably fall over in the not too distant future if we don't do anything. I wasn't able to get out there, but I'm going up and down Google Maps looking at all the other houses, and I see that probably a quarter to a third, from what I can see, are two-story houses at the back. Yes, this has got dormer windows at the front, so I think that is trying to maintain that heritage aspect of it with those dormers at the front. But I don't think it's an overdevelopment of the site. I'm looking at number 5, Luton Avenue, and that is almost covered the entire site, and so is number 23. So, and number 20 as well is covered, and 16 has almost covered the entire site, as well as number 6. So I am torn, but I think because this one is not listed, I'd have to agree with the alternate, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. Councillors, any other councillors wish to make comment? Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck. And thank you to Councillor Contel for putting forward this alternate. I too think this is a really challenging one. I appreciate the efforts that have been put into the design of this building, and I agree that aesthetically, as a standalone building, it is a lovely design. However, in taking into account what's been presented with respect to its compliance with the planning scheme, planning policy framework, and in particular that heritage character and the style of houses that predominate in that area, I think I struggle to support the alternative as it's been written. It is a really challenging one, and I would have loved to see there be some sort of different, something that could have been put forward to that did perhaps better meet some of those planning requirements, our local planning requirements in that heritage scheme, but still allowed, some redevelopment of the site to take place. I think looking at the property, it is, I don't necessarily agree with the comments that it should be completely retained as it is. I think it is, it is reasonable to look at doing some sort of development of that property to bring it up to a modern standard, and even accept that, a sort of graduated double story would be more appropriate if you look at some of those other double story houses along the street. And I've been down that street a number of times and familiar with it, and they are sort of graduated, those second stories, rather than being right up the front. So I think that visual impact is slightly different. I do feel for the applicants, and they have indicated that it is a residence for themselves, but again, it's they're not things that we can really take into account in the planning scheme. The other thing is I always think, in these planning meetings, our job is to apply the planning policies, but we also have to take into account community views. And I do note the large number of objections, and the fact that even with amended plans, those objections are retained. Now, that's not everything. We've got to listen to all sides of the story, but I guess I am mindful that there was a considerable number of local residents who also felt uncomfortable with this design, and they're the ones who, I guess, it's important that they feel that the character of their neighbourhood is being retained and respected. And I do worry, although this design is a lovely design, the precedent that it sets in terms of the scale and the bulk of this development is something that I'd be concerned about, and that perhaps a future development might not be as respectful, or it might not be as pleasant to look at in terms of its design, but take on those scale elements that maybe aren't as consistent with the rest of the neighbourhood. So, yeah, I don't think I can support the alternate.
Thank you, Councillor Mansfield. Councillors, if there's no one else to make comment, we're going to put that to the vote. So, councillors, for those in favour of the alternate without item F at number 1. Those in favour of the alternate application, please raise your hands. Those against the application? Thank you. The alternate application has been approved. Thank you, councillors, for spending your evenings on Zoom. We really appreciate it, and thank you everybody for watching. Thank you.